Those who have been to a ruined wedding, what happened? I played a wedding where as we started playing the set, everyone ran outside and nobody was to be seen for the rest of the night. I originally assumed it was because nobody liked us, but the bride came in afterwards and said there was a huge fight involving multiple members of both families and everyone basically went home upset, injured or in a police van. We couldn't stop playing since we were paid and it was our job, and the only person watching was the drunk uncle dancing on his own asking for requests we didn't know. I was not born yet, but my parents rented the observation deck on the Hancock Building in Boston for their reception. Tallest building in the city, beautiful view. My dad pored over historic weather charts to figure out what day was statistically most likely to be nice out. Day of the wedding comes and of course, thick fog unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Couldn't see a thing out the windows of the room they had picked specifically for the view. Worked out well though, they were happily married for nearly 30 years before cancer took my dad's life a few years ago. There's one other funny anecdote from that wedding. The wedding was held in King's Chapel, which is an incredibly historic church here in downtown Boston that's somewhat of a major tourist attraction. To close that on a weekend afternoon for a wedding, it turns out, was not very expensive. The tourists waiting outside to see the church didn't know that, though, and someone started the rumor that my parents were incredibly wealthy, maybe even Kennedys. As a result, there were tons of people taking photos of them when they left the ceremony. Not sure if any of them ever figured out that my parents were most certainly not rich or famous. When I was 6 or 7 I went to a cousin's wedding. Everything was fabulous for little me, so much sugar everywhere, basically heaven. The reception was in a big community center that was reserved for the occasion. Went to the girls' bathroom, passing by the men's room to see my uncle on the floor. Went back to the main room to tell my dad my uncle was looking weird. Well, uncle had a stroke and had died. The bride spent the rest of the afternoon crying, and everyone except close family left. Bright side is the marriage is still going strong 20 years later, despite what happened that day. I work at a golf course with a lot of history behind it. We do wedding venues inside the clubhouse and the actual ceremony is held outside by the historic water fountain and large pond. First problem was the weather. I live in the high desert and it was very warm. A solid 90 degrees that day and it was also pretty windy. So everyone's outside, no umbrellas, no easy ups. The next problem, and probably the worst, was the golf cart incident. The bride and groom wanted to ride into the sunset on one of our golf carts. Drive around a little bit on the golf course. To be fair, it is beautiful on the course during sunset. However, the cart had somehow gotten a nail in the tire went flat, battery on the cart went crazy and the cart ended up freaking out. It came to an complete stop from 15 miles per hour to 0. The wheels and mechanisms locked up, almost seizing. Both the bride and groom, fairly overweight mind you, both fell out and rolled over a few times. They were totally okay, just a few bruises and perhaps a bruised ego or two. So retrieving that cart was fun. And last but not least, the power inside the clubhouse went out due to the high winds. There was no after party available. Only the cake was cut, hardly any food was given out. Yeah, not a great day to cover for someone on your day off. Leading up to my friend's wedding, his father had been battling cancer after a terminal diagnosis. And it was touch and go whether he would be well enough to attend the wedding. In the end he was too unwell to attend despite wishing that he could. Just as we got to the wedding reception, my friend was informed that his father had just passed away. It was devastating. Very beautiful wedding in a huge barn at this apple orchard. They must have spent a ton of money on the decorations and catering because it looked like something out of a magazine. The ceremony was great, the flower girl did her thing, the vows got everyone choked up. Everything seemed to be going well. Not even 15 minutes into the reception, the mothers of the bride and groom getting into a full-out brawl, hair pulling, red wine being thrown. Their sons jump in to defend their honor, chairs start being thrown, tables are flipped, parents are grabbing children and running for their lives. The bride and groom are horrified and leave immediately and head back their honeymoon suite. My fiancé and I left after this as well, but we heard from some other friends that most people ended up staying and getting wasted at the open bar on the bride and groom's dime. Apparently the fight started because one of the groom's sister complimented the bride's grandmother's dress. The bride's mom thought she was being sarcastic and called her a bitch, then the drama ensued. Mind you, they had all been pre-gaming the wedding pretty hard. Happened to my classmate. He is a successful middle-level manager, divorced, about 35 or so. Found a girl of his dreams but from a provincial poor town. The girl insisted to have the wedding in her town to show off her success. The wedding is crashed by her old friends, including male friends who are not that sophisticated and have some tense feelings towards the successful groom from the city. Somebody starts a fight in the middle of wedding, groom is trying to stop it and got stabbed in the back. Died right there. And he was my classmate. I met this guy in night college class, he was my study partner. He was always wearing some kind of crazy outfit, all leather and sunglasses indoors like Riddick, or growing Wolverine burns and dyeing them purple and wearing John Lennon-style purple shades. Turned out he had bad teeth, came from a terrible childhood, his mom pawning his stuff for drugs, etc., and the outfits were distraction from his teeth, which he was terribly self-conscious about. He was the kindest person I've ever met, and quickly became one of my very best friends. He fell in love with this African-American girl he worked with. He was white, she just loved him as much as he did her. As soon as her family found out, things got ugly, and they ended up living in my spare bedroom for a year. Her father was a preacher and wasn't thrilled she was dating a poor white kid with bad teeth. Her mother, though, was devastated. They decided to get married, and it was court job, show up, wait in line, get your certificate. I was the best man, and just did what I could to make it happy. Her father, to give him credit, tried to put a bold face on it, but the mother wept disconsolately and loudly through the entire procedure. After the wedding, in a quiet moment with the father, I told him my friend had a heart of pure gold. I offered to take them anywhere they wanted for their first married meal, and bless them, they just wanted hometown buffet. 6 years later they had an 18-month-old son, and he was at home with the baby and dropped dead of a massive heart attack, age 34 or 35. So I went to his funeral, and watched as his mother-in-law and father-in-law wept like babies and told story after story about his kindness and his love and what a good person he was. At the end I shook hands with his father-in-law and all he said was heart of gold. A woman my partner went to school with was getting married. We were invited but declined as she was a huge bully to my partner during high school. 2 of my partner's friends were her bridesmaids and told me about the train wreck of a ceremony. In the lead up to the big day, this woman chose her perfect princess dress. Cue the next 9 months of eating takeout and putting on heaps of weight. A month out, during the fitting, she can't fit into the dress and she's bawling her eyes out in the change room. Her mum drags the bridesmaids into the change room and forces them to tell the bride that she's beautiful no matter what, but she needs to go on a juice cleanse/diet until the wedding. They refuse and the mum gently tells the bride to do the cleanse. Fast forward a month, the bride has lost a few kilos and it's time for the big day. She arrives at the super fancy chapel, reception there too, $300 pp with over 100 guests. She's walking down the aisle and there's a ripping sound. She continues to walk and her dress rips when she's halfway down the aisle. Cue the frantic covering up of the tear. She eventually makes it to her future husband and they get married. At the reception it's the usual lovey-dove drivel. After the speeches are done, she gets unbelievably wasted and starts to dance aggressively. After hours of drinking and dancing, her dress rips some more and by the end of the night, she's basically in her underwear. Needless to say, we missed a crazy night. I was best man at my sister-in-law's wedding, stepped in for the brother of the groom, that's another story entirely. For a whole year of planning, all the bride, new sister-in-law, wanted was a dove release while they said handwritten vows to each other. Very small, non-denominational, most of the family are atheist anyway. Wedding day arrives, early summer, and something is off with the bird handlers. They show up a bit late and are sourcing help from the wedding party to get everything in line. When the time comes to say their vows, I help the handler carry the chest with the doves in it over to what is to be the altar where the bride and groom are standing. Vows are just about wrapping up and the handler gives me the signal to open the chest. I open it and see 20 to 30 dead doves in the crate. I immediately close it to try and limit who knows what happened. Too late. The look of horror on her face was all that was needed. We spent the next few hours trying to cheer everyone up, but by the end of the reception the entire wedding party had organized and filed animal cruelty complaints on the handler. It was all anyone could focus on. I used to do catering work, and this one time my boss sent me to a remote location in the woods on a beautiful river. I found out while we were loading the truck that the boss wouldn't be going and that I was essentially in charge. My boss promised that everything was taken care of, set up, etc. So, you can imagine my surprise when I arrived to this remote location and literally nothing was set up. We were only about an hour early, so I frantically started trying to get the tent in order. We needed extension cords to run the coffee and tea, there were none. We needed tables to set up the food, there were none. I somehow whipped up impromptu everything for the missing things, and just as the bride and groom are arriving, we blow the fuse for our only power source and the place is plunged into darkness. We reset the breaker, I move some stuff around. Blow the fuse again. This delicate dance went on for the entire evening. Through speeches, first dance, the works. I think the worst part of the entire experience was when we went to rinse our dishes before boxing them up and found out that when we blew the fuses the water pump for the place stopped working and needed to be primed again. At that point I said forget about it, we'll take them back dirty, and the crew and I spent several more hours after the long ride home doing them. That was the day I worked a 15-hour shift without a break and still ruined the wedding. Needless to say, I quit that job. The mother of the groom was an alcoholic for many years. She decided to quit drinking cold turkey a few days before his wedding. During the reception, she had a seizure and was taken to the hospital via ambulance. The wedding was at a state park that's famous for its giant gorge/waterfall. I don't know whose idea this was, but someone suggested a photo overlooking this gorge and everybody was game. The wedding party went around a stone security barrier and the maid of honor literally fell off the cliff to her death. It was like 500+ feet. Attended a wedding reception and was seated near the cameraman. An aunt of mine was sitting closer to the camera and spent the evening commenting and gossiping about everyone, and much of it came out on the video. The cameraman was great, he did 2 copies, one edited and the other no holds barred. The unedited version is the stuff of legend. Was a guest of friend of the bride, did not know anyone attending. Very expensive over-the-top place, several hundred guests of this very Italian wedding. Maid of honor grabs mic at the cocktail hour, begins her speech, rambling, drunk. Quickly devolves to stating the recently deceased mother of the bride was against this wedding and that's basically what killed her. Plus Vinny will never give up prostitutes. She is tackled by several people and dragged away. The happy couple is separated and divorced within a year. Groom got so drunk the night before he couldn't make it to the altar at the ceremony. They still had the ceremony with only the bride and her party, plus one of the groomsmen, who apparently didn't get wasted. Everyone there was shaking their heads the entire time. The groom did make one singular appearance for a few seconds at the reception. He looked like a zombie and was wearing street clothes. And this was no trashy wedding. The bride was a professional dancer for a major label pop star, so that gives you an idea of the type of people that were in attendance. 200+ people at the ceremony alone, probably double that at the reception. They divorced within 6 months.